Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Stour Valley and Poole Partnership meeting. There's a bit of an echo, so hang on. Okay, hopefully that should be better now. So again, welcome to the Stour Valley and Poole Partnership meeting today, which is the 23rd of May. So without further ado, I am just going to go straight to the agenda we have today. We have first item of business is the election of chair. But before we do that, I just have some basic housekeeping to read out. Please note that this meeting of the Stour Valley Poole Partnership Joint Committee is being live streamed, and the whole meeting will be recorded by the Council to support the production of the minutes for the use of democratic services. In order to ensure the meeting is managed effectively, please could everyone present follow the following ground rules for speaking. Only speak when invited to by the chairman, and mute your microphone when you're not talking, which I forgot to do, so I apologise for that. So we'll move on to the first item of business, which is the election of the chairman for the coming municipal or the current municipal year. So just looking to the floor, are there any nominations, please, for chair? Yes, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as it's the turn of Dorset Council to chair the meeting, I'm happy to nominate Councillor Kirby to be the chair for the following year.
Thank you very much for that. I'm very happy to second that proposal. Any other nominations for chair? No? Okay, so as there's only one nomination, Councillor Kirby, congratulations. We'll now swap seats.
Thank you, councillors. Yes, this time it's quite a begrudging. Begrudgingly, I take on the chair for the next. I think it's probably for the next two meetings as we watch. I feel like we're children in a dissolving relationship, watching our parents quarrel. But we'll crack on through. Okay, so the next item is the election of a vice chair.
Yes, Chair. I'm happy to nominate Councillor Haynes as vice chair.
I'm happy to second that as well. Are there any other nominations? Fabulous. Thank you, Councillor Haynes. Congratulations on your new role for vice chair. Okay, Nikki, do I have any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, 3 apologies have been received for Councillor Deadman, Councillor Lewis and Councillor Parks. And also to note that Councillor Farquhar is observing today. He's hopefully joining the committee longer term, but until that's ratified today, he'll be observing.
Fabulous. Welcome, Councillor Farquhar. You're more than welcome to get involved. Don't feel as if you have to observe. If you've got something to add, stick your hand up. Declarations of interest, members. And I have none. I'm going to go to the confirmation of the minutes. May I have a proposer to confirm the minutes are correct?
Yes, Chair, I'm happy to propose those minutes as correct.
Thank you, Councillor Haynes. A seconder. Yeah, and I believe we're all in favour. There's no dissenters on that. Fabulous, thank you. Which brings us on to agenda item 6, the budget and performance report. Paul Hudson.
Thank you, members. Just to say, the budget and performance report is actually fully reviewed by a scrutiny panel before it comes to yourself, and I do have several items from them for you to note within this report. But other than that, the recommendations there confirm the report was presented to them. If I may move through the report, just highlighting certain parts for you. Firstly, moving on to the financial implications for the year. The budget set for the year is £4,951,000. In item 6 shows the outturn position there of an overall underspend for the 2021-22 year of £665,000. That's divided up in accordance with the cost share agreement, which would be £435,000 for BCP Council and £230,953 for Dorset Council. Item 7 details where the SVP board met on the 10th of the Section 151 officers of the two councils, and it was proposed at that point in time, rather than the underspend going into SVPP reserves, for it to return to the Sovereign Councils for each of them to use appropriately within the 2022-23 financial year. The main purpose of that, SVPP already has a reserve, and we're now in the final year of the partnership. And within the agreement that we'll look at the next item on the agenda, both councils have agreed whatever underspend or overspends occur within 2022-23 will be met in line with the cost share agreement. So it didn't seem appropriate to hold reserves within the partnership that were unlikely to be used within the year. If I move on, that's the main part of the recommendations. Attached to that is the budget and performance report as it was presented to scrutiny panel. I'll just move firstly to the comments made by scrutiny panel. So scrutiny panel's comments to pass to yourselves in consideration today is, in summary, they were not happy with the call answer rates. They requested that be investigated at next meeting on the 7th of September. And other than that, they agreed the recommendations within their on blog. So if I return to the report, talking through initially performance, as I've said previously, it's a role of scrutiny panel to monitor performance on a quarterly basis, and anything that's outside of the tolerance there of plus or minus 5%, they would then call into review. And at the same time, they then mention that to yourselves as the joint committee for consideration. Moving forward to the benefit performance indicators on item 3.2. I would say there for both councils, the performance has been as expected this year, and alongside that, where there's been slight variances in performance in Dorset Council, when we look at Q3, the information which is supplied by the Department of Work and Pensions, that's actually very good performance, because during that period of time is when Dorset Council were converting to their new computer system. So actually within this year, there's that recognised downtime when you're bringing the 5 predecessor councils together. Alongside that, with change of circumstances, on some of those, if we look at BCP Council, the outcome there, the target is at this point in time 6 days, and it was performing at 9 days. I would remind members that throughout the whole of the year, both benefit services were carrying out test and trace payments to support people through COVID-19. So we're allocating resources appropriately throughout that year. But on either of those, I have no issues really to report in the performance there as I'd expect. Moving on to council tax collection rates, we did say a year ago that we'd expect it to take up to 3 years to bring collection rates back to the levels that were prior to COVID. So in item 4.3 shows our current collection rate levels for council tax. Currently down BCP Council 1.9% compared to 1920, and the same position for Dorset Council down 1.9%. Moving on to business rates, we had and it was questioned by members the last time, the amount of rate release that we actually awarded and what the collections would be outside of that. So at this point in time, if I was, for BCP Council, we have a collection rate of 95.9%. And looking at the actual data we had, we're saying that's down approximately 4.1%. It would have been 1% better if we'd have added those released back in on the main period. So it'd be about 3.1% would have been so we'd have been saying it'd be 96.9% at the end of the year. For Dorset Council, it would improve from being down 6.8% to approximately 5%. However, that is analysing collection rates on what the debit would have been not including rate release. So there was a great deal of rate release awarded by the government to people's rate accounts to support through COVID. Then moving on, item 5, to the enforcement service. We had intended with the enforcement service to try and make it a break-even position for the enforcement service through the year. But if you look at item 5.10, the outturn position is actually £119,000 of income within the service. The service has performed well for the first year of recommencing recovery, and alongside that, several members of the team were actually supporting the main SVPP budget with the processing of energy reliefs and grant payments. So within that, we've then charged from the SVA budget across to the SVPP the cost of their salaries, and that's contributed to some of the increase in the outturn from the expected position. I then move on to customer access, and primarily looking at item 6.5, this was the details last presented by myself to members with regard to the call answer rates. And if we look there, we had 2 data sales for this year, November 21 and January 22, with an answer rate being 85% and 87% to a target of 85%. However, since that time, I continue in that we've had further details available and further extractions from the BCP telephony system, which would indicate from the period from October to March that the actual answer rate was approximately 71%. This is what was mentioned by Scrutiny panel and noted for your consideration today, that being 71% it is outside of the 5% tolerance of the 85% of our answer rate requirements. So within that, it's been recommended that ourselves and the customer access team of BCP Council attend the next scrutiny panel on the 7th of September and duly review telephone performance for the SVPP. Although I've mentioned it in the main item of the report, item 7 again confirms the actual budget position for the partnership with the £665,000 underspend at the end of the year. And Chair, that really concludes the report.
Fabulous, thank you, Mr. Hudson. Are there any questions from members on the report? Councillor Haynes.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point of clarification, 5.11 to do with the enforcement agency. The last line says that therefore 105,414 will go to BCP and 14,355 to Dorset. So this is on top of the underspend, isn't it? This is a separate line item altogether. So this will be in addition to the 600 and something 100,000 underspend.
Yes, that would be in addition. The enforcement service operates to separate targets, and it's based on actual turnover per authority within that year. So yes, for BCP Council there'd be a further 105,000, and for Dorset Council 14,000.
Okay, that's correct. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, actually, that was one of the questions I was going to pick up, actually, just to see whether it was additional or was incorporated within that, so that's useful to know. Yeah, another parts of the report. Just wanted to, you talked about the business rates collection there. Just to clarify my understanding, so we've got as an example, so BCP, well, and BCP and Dorset Council, in 1920 was 98% collection. 2020-21, that's dropped to 90.7 and 88.3 respectively. 21-22, it's up to 95.9 and 93.2 there. Those are what's been collected in the year, but I'm guessing obviously there's still activity going on with sort of arrears being collected and potentially enforcement action if necessary. So would it be right to expect those, particularly those 2021 figures, to tick up a little bit over as time goes on? How far do you think that will end up away from the 1920 figures from experience?
From experience, the first thing I'd say, those figures are our in-year collection figures, not our overall collection figures, and we would anticipate, even though that says 95.9%, that it would come up near 99% for our overall collection on business rates. The only difference would be there, it could be an unusual period of time for companies that become insolvent. So normally we'd be expecting that we would take monies from them. We're aware from a lot of the COVID grants that have been given out nationally that more companies are failing at this point in time. So that could be affected in that way, but our aim remains to be 99% overall collection of the funds.
Councillor Brown again, yeah.
Yeah, and then just further on the customer access to it, which has obviously been picked up by the scrutiny panel. And I know we've sort of spoke about this before, haven't we, about the difficulties of getting the data from the sort of systems, which is obviously why we've got a couple of sort of months data there. You said looking at, is it October to March, October 21 to March 22 data. How reliable is that answer rate where you're saying it's about 71%? Is that data sort of 100% reliable? Are we sure of that?
The first thing I wanted to do with that data was to advise members from the information that was presented as 6.5 at the last meeting to say that that doesn't agree with the most recent set of data. I've not yet been in contact with colleagues within customer services to say which of those is the most accurate. I'm just reporting the variance on data that we've got. From feedback I think we're getting from customers, I'd probably say the answer rate of 71% would probably be more likely to where I think it would be based on the feedback that we're getting from people being unable to get through. However, as has been mentioned, there's been investment in there, and I can't speak on behalf of customer services. All I can say is we're working together, and by the time we bring the report back to members, we hope to make sure the data is robust and can be examined appropriately by scrutiny and on your behalf.
And just further to that then, so when the sort of data comes through and we're able to sort of look at it and analyse it and understand it, the scrutiny panel we're able to look at it, what areas is that going to be looking at? The telephony systems, or whether it's people working from home and not in the office, or is there any sort of sense as to why there's been the big shift from the sort of rates that we used to have to where we are now?
The first thing will be to bring you the data that's showing actual call answer rates, calls that aren't getting through, calls that were abandoned, so we've got a full picture, not only the ones that are waiting, the waiting times that go alongside that. We have had people working from home, both in the customer access team and a great deal of SVPP staff. The system, I would say at this point in time, as I've seen the new area of the system, monitors calls very well. In the beginning, I think members would be aware that we took immediate steps to get people working from home on Microsoft Teams wherever possible. We're now back in the position where we have technology that can monitor calls and abandon calls within that. With that in mind, I couldn't pinpoint exactly where we think the crunch points are. I would say that we are aware, if you look within the budget, of the underspend. I believe within that, the customer access team underspent about 28% of its budget through the 21-22 year. So I'd say there's definitely an issue there with recruitment at that point in time. Some of that we're aware of been changed. I would also say with the SVPP, where we've been carrying out grant work in all the other types of work, that we also have backlogs which are higher than we'd normally expect, and that's probably having an impact on call demand. So when we bring it to the next meeting, I think we need to highlight the telephone response rates and what impact our backlogs are also having on that, causing extra demand.
Just further supplementary on the same subject, and just so you talk obviously about the work on the grants and the sort of backlogs that's caused, that sort of rolls through. So the current workload we've had recently in terms of the energy rebate, is that going to similarly cause difficulties in terms of call answering because of sort of resources having to be shifted to that, or more calls coming through because of that? Is that currently causing difficulties as well?
With regards to the energy rebate, we're at the beginning stages of that, so it's issuing the payments out to direct debit payers, and at the same time sending letters of invitation to those not on direct debit. We have not supplied that with a telephone number. We supplied it in a similar way that we did with grants, which is an online application process, or to visit the local libraries if you require assistance. I did understand this morning that our local libraries are very busy at this point in time, with people now entering to start some of that process. That's the initial stage of energy rebates. We're reviewing it on a monthly basis to see if we're reaching out to people and contacting them. The main concern I have there, that is just work undertaken for BCP Council, so we still have to make sure in our processing our work that we prioritise our work for Dorset Council at the same time. I do envisage this will again have another impact on service delivery as we go forward at this point in time, especially I'm hearing on the news lunchtime that there's further measures to come from the government to support. And I would imagine a great deal of ways that we may be the vehicle that provides some of that support.
Carries on, doesn't it? Further sort of supplementary following on from that, obviously the government has sort of said about doing the energy rebate. Are we getting recompense from the central government for the resources and time and postage and processing and software changes and everything that's needed for that? Which I'm hoping and assuming we are, which is part of what sort of within sort of will be part of this year's outturn. But also, I mean, I've been reading stuff in the sort of national press about. I can see systems-wise, it's obviously easiest to refund people who are paying by direct debit, and I've had my £150 rebate. Thank you very much. But it's often those people who are in more difficult circumstances and more vulnerable that aren't paying by direct debit that probably need that £150 rebate more, but they're going to be taking longer to get from them. Just to around the decision, I can appreciate the decision about not having a phone number on those letters, because actually if we're having difficulty answering the calls, then it's not going to be that helpful. Quite a few people won't have sort of online, or won't find it easy to get online access to sort of apply for that rebate. And again, in libraries, actually in my ward in North Poole, we don't have a library. We used to have a mobile library service, and that was canned a few years ago. So actually those people in my ward in that circumstance have got a bit of a trek to get to a library to be able to go and apply for their £150 rebate that they're due. So what is our planning to make sure that everybody who is entitled to that can access that as easily as possible? Because I am concerned about those that most need it. Some of those will be missing out on it and won't get it because of circumstances.
As I respond, it's just to say I'm responding on behalf of BCP Council, Dorset Council administering this separately. So my response is just solely for BCP. With regards to that process, is the discussions we've had at this point in time, we've started in the initial phase, which is the direct debit payers, which is we're assuming that will be approximately 100,000 of the 150,000 people we have to reach. The 50,000 people have been invited specifically by letter with that process to apply online, and at this stage we are promoting it to be online because it's the quickest way to get the payment there. We will be reviewing on a monthly basis as we reach the timetable of September to administer this, and in consultation with BCP Council there may be different steps that are taken. I also believe that there will be different steps of feedback to government on the administering of this scheme. So to be clear, everywhere we talk, where everyone calls it a council tax rebate, it's an energy rebate payment. The guidance from government was to make payment, you could make payment to people by direct debit, where they had a proven bank account, you can validate that. So within this process, we have a software system that validates the bank account's correct, matches the person's name. If it doesn't, in those exceptions, we then check that. And in those cases, you could have customers that are on direct debit that are not receiving a direct payment, but they're receiving an application form because there's something that's a bit of a match within our system. We've also said that it's not council tax. We're having to extract our council tax data to provide this, and it's a separate, almost creditor's payment on the side. So as things progress, I think the government will start reviewing. At the moment, their recommendation is direct debit, and then you let people seek to make an application, which is then validated through some credit checking processes that we go through. Later on, it may be that it's available to make that payment directly to the council tax account, and that will be other considerations that will take place further on. But at this point in time, the steps have been taken to have maximum saturation at a point of start, and then other processes will be introduced as we go through. And most definitely, the most, say that our most vulnerable taxpayers or residents would be something that's definitely considered throughout that whole process, and I could speak on behalf of both councils with that approach. So the main thing was to get the first stages done in line with guidance.
Around the payment for all that work is in terms of the government, etc.
Sorry, yes, I can say payment for that. If you see with some of our underspend, on the last, we have received payment. Both councils will receive sums to administer. Within that, I think the government will also consider, if that doesn't seem to be enough, to reconsider that process going forward on this occasion. If you look at some of the underspend for last year, a great sum of the underspend was actually new burdens funding that we had to carry out grant work, which has now been returned to those councils. The most difficult thing for us within the marketplace is at this point in time, it's impossible to bring in experienced additional resources because every council's under the same pressures to try and administer grants. So where we talk about some of our backlogs, yes, we're receiving funding from government, which is being passed on to SVPP, but we're not able to recruit temporary staff to cover that. And we're also balancing, as we said, to try and reduce our workforce by about £1 million by doing vacancy control at this point in time. So that's all putting pressures on us meeting our turnaround times. And personally, when we weren't expecting to be, we've never been requested to administer an energy grant rebate before. So it's another new thing for us and every other council in the country.
Yeah, I think Councillor Brown asked my question about did the government provide additional funding to administer grants. It sounds like they have, and it's enough at the moment. The problem is that we just can't get the staff. My concern is around some of the fraud and the liability. So we're doing the bank checks. I'm still really worried about some of the fraud that went on over COVID, and that if and I know that there was some concerns over whether or not if the council will be liable if for some of the fraud. Well, is it the same situation with the energy payments?
Yes, we are, in being paid to administer, also being paid to be diligent in how we administer those payments. And when we spoke about the telephone, that was another one of our initial reasons why we didn't make telephone applications possible, because we were very aware of the significant likelihood of fraud within some of those areas where people were phoning customers on the pretext that they're the council. So yes, we are responsible, as we are with the grant administration, for where we've, if there is fraud has been committed and it's committed by the person, I would say we're not responsible, but if it seems that our administration has allowed that to happen, then that could be consequences for the local authority.
It still makes me itchy and uncomfortable, but I'm sure we have the process in place, which is good. So my concerns are around the benefit performance indicators, 3.1 and 3.2. I see that we seem to be on track. In fact, actually, all that and Dorset's council seems to just about be on track as well. My concern is why we're unable to currently get the data from the SVPP operating in the Dorset area. I always get slightly concerned because these are again these are our most vulnerable, especially average time to take and process new claims and the changes in circumstances, and it seems to be going down. But is Katie Hale on the call? Could she give me the Dorset Council figures for the SVPP area? Sorry, for the SVPP administered Dorset Council area. Does that make sense?
It's probably best, Chair, that I explain how that process works. So where Dorset Council have a line to one database, we no longer have an east area for performance and a north area for performance. It's Dorset Council's performance. And the figures there that are in stars are what's been extracted from DWP data processing for housing benefit. So we can have the Dorset data and that available to you at the next meeting. And obviously my colleague Katie might be able to give that to you now. But with regards to that, we have no areas of concern within those performance figures. In as we say, where it may be 22 days, that's at a period of time where system conversion, etc., is underway. So in summary, that it's not that we're not provided the Dorset data, it's extracted as one set of data for Dorset Council now, as would be the case for BCP Council if we'd have aligned our databases.
Oh, thank you. Okay, Councillor Haynes.
Thank you, Chair. It's just coming back to the CAT issue where they are not answering calls, so the answer rate is 71%. And I had also picked up on 6.8, which is the point that Mr. Hudson had actually mentioned, that the underspend within the SVPB CAT is probably related to staff shortage, i.e. recruitment issues. So I guess what I'm wondering is, because we are now, sadly, SVPP is now going to be split up, whether that would actually mean that with the best will in the world, we might still see recruitment issues in terms of, because there is some uncertainty, because it's going through this transition period, that whether the feeling is we might still continue to experience recruitment issues, and therefore it would then impact the call answering service.
Thank you. I would say with the conversations we're having with the BCP CAT for that, there has been investment in staffing for that, and I'm aware that we have got additional resources allocated to those lines. Upon the ending of SVPP, all remaining staff that are actually on permanent contracts will be transferred to BCP Council. And with the call answer rate expectations that will continue for BCP, I would say recruitment within that area is likely to be on temporary contracts at this point in time. But I know recruitment's underway, and I know recruitment's taking place, and staff are being trained. I can't actually say at the moment whether the 71% is the correct figure or the 85%. All I can say, we will be reviewing both of those sets of data and bringing back accurate information for the next meeting for review by Scrutiny panel.
Okay, thank you for that. But then I guess my concern remains that if we are therefore looking to employ temporary staff, they get trained up, and then they may stay, they may move on, and then we're kind of prolonging the some of the issues that we may be facing within that area. And as I said, because it is actually being looked at by a scrutiny panel, so it will be interesting to see what they come up with.
Yes, I would say it's inevitable that where we're holding temporary contracts to reduce down the expenditure costs of SVPP in order to mitigate redundancy, that it's likely that that will be having an impact on the ability to recruit permanent staff at this point in time, and it may impact throughout the course of this till December. In December, we will clearly know for BCP Council what the structure is going forward and in what investments possible there. So yes, I do believe that we will be having an impact on performance with regards to the final year.
Thank you, Chair. I guess it's just a case of watch this space.
Thank you, Councillor Haynes. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to there are a set of recommendations, and if everyone's happy, I'm going to take it on block. Sorry, Chair. Sorry, David. Oh, the struggle is real today.
Actually, just as we're going to those recommendations, just read through the recommendations, and obviously the discussion about the recommendation about the next meeting, the telephony services request. I notice it says request the BCP Director of Customer Service and Business Delivery or their representative attend the next meeting to support this process. I'd propose a slight amendment to that recommendation to add and also request the attendance of the relevant portfolio holder for customer services at BCP to attend the meeting as well.
That would be a proposal to go to the chair of Scrutiny, because those recommendations were Scrutiny's recommendations within that, but if you're minded.
To be honest, I don't have an issue with it.
I think it would be useful if they were in attendance as the sort of politically responsible person for that, as well as the sort of relevant officer or representative of the officer, for them to be at least in attendance.
I am picking up on the fact that I'm not a BCP councillor, but I understand that there's correct me if I'm wrong, but is there some work going on in the BCP with regards to customer services that sort of more of a wider approach? I don't know, actually, I'll tell you what, I won't go to you, Paul Studson, I'll go to May. Do you want to comment on that?
No, all I was going to say was I take on board what Councillor Brown has said, but I think because in the papers it does say that it has all been amalgamated into one team, whereas before, I think previously, we have had a separate CAT team just dedicated to SVPP, but now it's like a pool of people. So I'm just trying to think the discussion will, with the portfolio holder, it will encompass a team that answers calls for things other than SVPP as well. So whether it's possible to separate the two, I guess that's really what I'm saying, that yes, it's useful to have that person, the portfolio holder, but whether it will actually have any value add simply because of the current arrangements, as in it's a general pool, not just dedicated to SVPP. That was really what I was thinking. It's more a case of I'm thinking out loud.
Yeah, I get that. I think what we could do is we could just have an open invite, and if they'd like to attend, then they may attend. It's not within our authority to be able to be able to force someone to be here, but if we could provide an open invite, and if they'd like to attend, and that may be a way of furling. Is that a happy compromise? Just out of interest, who's the cabinet member? Okay, well, it depends on those REs and what we're trying to fit it in, but we could just send an open invite just to say that this has been raised by our board, and if they'd like to rock up, then they're more than welcome to. Well, that'd be quite interesting for them to see the work of the SVPP. Fab. Okay, all right then. So if we have that, then so if we go to on block, so note and comment on the performance of. Are you happy if I take it on block? And then with the addition of if we put in a D, just an invite to the just to invite the relevant portfolio holder, Paul, Mr. Hudson, sorry.
Sorry, Chair. I think you may be referring to the recommendations that were for scrutiny panel, which is on the attachment. Your recommendations are A and B on the budget and performance report. Thank you.
Thank you. I've now scrolled up. But I'm happy to include that then as a C. Yeah, I don't think it's going to do any harm having a portfolio holder here if they are responsible for the CAT team and they answer any of the calls. Again, it can just be a standing invite. It doesn't have to be anything formal. So if we take it on block, are you happy to take it on block? Yeah. So recommendation A: acknowledge the performance of the Stour Valley and Poole Partnership for 2021-2022 as detailed in the report presented to Scrutiny Panel Appendix 1. B: agreed the partnership underspent in 2021-2022 of £665,953 be returned to the partner councils in line with the cost share agreement. And then C, the additional one, is that we invite the cabinet member responsible for customer services. We were happy with that? Fabulous, thank you. Okay, and let's crack on. I'll tell you what, I'm still getting used to the Borough of Poole, BCP, that was a slip, microphones. If we move on to agenda item 7, it's again, Mr. Hudson.
Thank you, Chair. Agenda item 7 is the dissolution SVPP. I'll just take you through the report, if I may, to some of the key points. I think when members last met, there was concern that the timetable would be met and an agreement reached by the 31st of March. So I'm pleased to say that an agreement has been reached, an amicable separation, and the report details for you in item 6 some of the main points of the ending the SVPP in the letter of agreement that's been signed. Detailing there, one of the first lines, that BCP Council to retain the SVPP reserve, the 672,000, but alongside that, take on board any of the risks that might be associated with any redundancies within the SVPP. Dorset Council will pay BCP Council on the 31st of March the sum of £1.1 million towards sunk costs. And alongside that, the SVPP does have its own pension fund, so upon termination of the partnership, the pension fund to be split in line with the cost share agreement. And very importantly for our staff, all SVPP staff, with the exception of the post-reference redundancies or where temporary contracts will be terminated, will transfer to BCP Council Financial Services. The next part of that, which formed part of the letter of agreement, was a timetable, and I'm pleased to say that a timetable for the transfer of functions has been agreed amicably between BCP Council and Dorset Council. But to make clear, as the SVPP ends, as there's transfers of functions to Dorset Council, at a similar time those functions will also transfer to BCP Council, with the objective being by the end of December all main functions of service delivery would have transferred to both councils. Dorset Council's undertaking this in an incremental basis, so part by part, which is detailed in the attached plan. For BCP Council, it's assumed that the transfer will take place after it's transferred to Dorset Council, but at the same time allow the opportunity to bring together BCP revenues and benefit services for Bournemouth, along with the colleagues from SVPP that are transferring to BCP to create the new BCP revenues and benefit service. So alongside that, we do have some staff consultation and a restructure exercise going on within BCP that's being fully supported by HR and other colleagues within the project teams. So without that, alongside that, I should say, that's where the process has been to recruit, have vacancy control in place and recruit temporary contracts to support to the process. So at this point in time, I'm pleased to say to members that the transfer timetable is already underway. There are good relationships between officers of BCP Council, SVP and Dorset Council in delivering this. I would just add, when Scrutiny panel reviewed the process, their comments for you to consider that councillors wish to highlight the extreme risk of the recruitment process and the impact this could have on the transfer timetable. They feel there is not enough officers for both councils and wish to know if this has been risk assessed by both councils. Other than that, the recommendation is approved. What members' concerns were there that if Dorset Council is in the position where it needs to recruit staff, will they be able to recruit? And also what impact that might have on the staff that are within SVPP. At that point in time, all I can say from SVPP, it's not actually a risk because the services will be transferring to BCP Council and Dorset Council, and each council will undertake those risk assessments themselves within their delivery processes. And that summarises the report, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Mr. Starton, are there any questions from members? Councillor Brown.
I don't want to be the only one that talks today, but I'm sure other members will have questions. But just as a first off, obviously I welcome the fact that an agreement was reached by the deadline. I think we're all sort of relieved that sort of a mutual settlement agreement was reached, because without that, I think there'd have been a lot more difficulties and headaches. So I'm glad that officers managed to sort of work that through and get that work completed and do it by the deadline. So that's to be welcomed. Just one of the first questions really on the point 2 of the termination of the collaboration agreement about BCP will bear the risk associated with the SVPP redundancies and indemnify Dorset Council against any claim arising in respect. So just to clarify what the risks will be around those redundancies, is that if there was a sort of a tribunal or for a business or those sorts of issues, or what are the risks that we're looking at?
Within the risk, there's two areas. We're bringing together the senior management team of SVPP with the senior management team of BCP revenues and benefits. There may be some risks within that area of senior officers where there's more that's needed to do the job. That will be reviewed by BCP Council in line with their normal processes of redundancy, redeployment, whatever it may be. However, outside of the senior management, we've mitigated that fully by holding extensive vacancies also within our Bournemouth BCP area. So with regards to that mitigation of risk for BCP and acknowledged through this process over the last 2 years, it should be that almost all those staff transfer into the structure. Where there is some mitigation there, it could be that we've had temporary contracts that are longer than 2 years. So they move into that process where there could be, for example, a redundancy payment required if necessary. However, we still continue with, we're averaging about 5 resignations every 4 to 6 months at this point in time. So it's very likely by the time we get to our December period for BCP Council that they would have a workforce that's required, and may even be, as we're talking about the customer access team, maybe the ability to change some of those temporary contracts into permanent contracts. So mitigating the risk is that any claim that could arise from any member of staff, and at this point in time, knowing that we probably have more at the senior management level than may be required by BCP, but there's a great deal of other areas that may be changed there, for example, provided through revenues and benefits or financial services. So we're hoping to mitigate wherever possible the impact.
Go on, May.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to follow on actually the same point that Councillor Brown has picked up, but it's just the last bit of that sentence where it says BCP will indemnify DC against any successful claims arising in respect to thereof. So I just wanted a point of clarification that the current SVPP staffing structure, do they not all come under BCP payroll? So I was just a bit curious to say indemnify DC. So do we have any members of staff actually on DC's payroll, or which was I was kind of thinking, okay, that's curious.
All SVPP staff are employed by BCP Council. I believe really that was a legal line put in that's probably put into most agreements, but within these circumstances, yes, you're correct, every member of staff is already a BCP employee.
Thank you, Chair. I have one more question, which is paragraph 9. The last bit, it says any under overspend will be shared. So does that mean if you go into a loss position, as I call it, the deficit will be equally shared as well? Because it says under over. So I just wanted it clarified that if we do overspend, that we would actually share that cost according to the percentage agreed.
Yes, I believe this may be the first year of SVPP where it's likely that we will overspend, mainly to support the transfer timetable. So say, for example, we were transferring, I'll just give an example, the business rates team. Dorset Council will require funds transferred to them or not paid to BCP to carry out the business rate function, as will BCP Council. That's likely to cost more than it currently does within one area of budget on its own. So in those circumstances, it could be that we are returning funds to both councils and creating some stranded costs or overspend within SVPP. The same may apply to temporary contracts that are not needed going forward, because effectively we are reducing SVPP by £1 million of expenditure. So both councils within that process have agreed that in the likelihood of an overspend, it will be exactly in line with the cost share agreement and split in that way.
So just that interesting phrase, stranded costs. Is that therefore, as part of this agreement, who bears that cost? Would it be BCP? Because we had the agreement, as discussed in the previous item, that the reserve would actually then transfer all to BCP to cover off redundancies, etc., etc. So is that purely redundancy, or is that meant to cover stranded costs as well? But how's the stranded cost going to be dealt with?
I do have the answer for you, Councillor, but Adam Richards is the Section 151. He's put his hand up previously. So
Go on, Adam, as a specialist.
If I can come in and maybe help Councillor Haynes with inquiries. So from a BCP council perspective, the stranded costs do not come into force until the end of the agreement. So for BCP, I think we've got around about 465,000 of stranded costs that are referred to within the process, and that is something that BCP Council will have to deal with from the 1st of April 2023 onwards, hence the compensation of £1.1 million to enable us a period of time to adjust, a transition, and try to establish how we can then deliver those savings going forward on an annual basis. So that's for that financial year. In regards to the financial year 22-23, there will be no stranded costs because we've agreed a budget for the SVPP, and I think as Paul's highlighted, that no matter what that outturn is for that financial year, whether it's overspend or underspend, it will be split between the two sovereign authorities in line with that cost sharing agreement. Hopefully that helps. I suppose the other element to that is just to emphasise that we have, from a BCP council perspective, we will also retain that residual reserve, and that residual reserve should hopefully fund any of those redundancy costs should they arise.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I just wanted one further clarification. Adam, you mentioned about 1.1 million, I use the word compensation, to bear the cost for stranded costs, etc. I just wanted clarification because I thought in the papers it said it was something like 1.6, nearly 1.7 million. So does that mean that that figure actually includes the reserves? So therefore, they've just taken off the reserve. So it's not the 1.6 plus the reserve of 654,000 or whatever it is.
No, I think the agreement says, in regards to termination point 4, that Dorset Council will make an upfront contribution to BCP of 1.1. And within that documentation, it almost makes clear that on top of that, BCP Council will retain the reserve, but we have got that pension fund liability.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Not pension fund liability, sorry, that's wrong. The pension fund liability is split between the two. We have that possibility of having to cover any redundancy costs should they arise. Sorry, I apologise for my use of language there.
Okay, thank you, Adam. I think my question is more around the sort of probably for Councillor Haynes to fill me in, but in terms of politically, has the dissolution gone to any scrutiny panel?
Not as far as I'm aware.
So in terms of who decided this was acceptable, I'm assuming it's just that the 151 officers from each council, and there was no political input. Is that correct?
Can I come in, Chair?
Of course you may.
Just to recall from a BCP council perspective, because clearly, others like Jim might want to comment on a Dorset council perspective, but BCP council met in January of this year to consider a report with regards to dissolution of the SVPP. As a cabinet report, that report could have been called in by Overview and Scrutiny Board. I do not believe in this occasion that it was called in for their consideration. As part of the recommendations of the report, it gave the delegation to myself in consultation with the leader to negotiate an amicable settlement. That I subsequently did, and in line with our good governance processes, I completed an officer decision record, and that was published, which hopefully then made it available to all members so that they could be aware of the process for their consideration. So that's a process that we went through. I think when Cabinet met in January, they were absolutely clear. It wasn't their preferred course of action. Their preferred course of action was clearly a Dorset-wide service, but they respected Dorset Council's position, and having respected Dorset Council's position, endorsed the attempts to set up an amicable process, which we eventually managed to achieve.
Thank you, Adam. That's very concise. Is Katie Hale on the call? Just wondering. I'm trying to find the yeah.
I am on the call. Yeah.
Thank you. Could you just do it from exactly the same question, but from a Dorset Council point of view? Thank you.
Yeah. So it was actually the same, but Dorset had their cabinet meeting on the 7th of December from recollection, and the same delegated authority was given to Adam. Sorry, that was given to Adam, was given to Aidan here at Dorset, and he followed the same process.
Fab. Just checking that there's not going to be any weird, nasty surprises. Paul, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I'd only add that I would just say from an SVPP perspective, things are progressing well, and the timetable looks very realistic to deliver the objective of the dissolution in a timely manner by December.
Okay, Fabs. If there's no more further questions, we'll. Oh, sorry, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I thought about the other members sort of chipping in. We talked about this sort of redundancy liability and that sort of paragraph of the agreement. I wanted to jump to paragraph 5, I think it was, of the agreement, about the pension fund liability, and how that will be split. Just to clarify, where does the pension fund liability sit at the moment in terms of, is that held on the sort of council of the relevant authorities anyway, or is it held in sort of SVPP's sort of own accounts? And can you just clarify the pension fund arrangements for staff? Are they all in the Dorset pension fund?
Chair, I think Mr. Richards is.
Adam, go for it.
So if I can just come in, so the answer to Councillor Brown's questions in reverse order are: if staff choose to be in the local government pension scheme, then they can be in the local government pension scheme. That is the pension scheme that's offered to them. But as with Dorset Council and BCP councils, not all staff choose to join that pension fund. So, but if they have chosen to be in the pension fund, then it will be part of the local government pension scheme that they'll be given the option to join. SVPP is a separate entity when it comes to the Dorset local government pension scheme, and therefore on a 3-year rolling basis, which you'll be familiar with, they have their own valuation, and what we found historically is that there's always a little bit of a deficit with regards to that historic assessment, and you'll be aware that from the 1st of April 2022 that we're in another valuation cycle, which will come up with whether or not there is a surplus or deficit on the SVPP element of the pension fund. What we're saying here is there is, then as we suspect there will be, then that will then be a portion between the two sovereign authorities in line with the cost sharing agreement that's always applied through this process. Hopefully that makes it clear, Chair, with regards to the position.
David, are you happy with that answer?
Yeah, that does help. I will just at that point, just for clarity and transparency, just declare a sort of interest that I'm a committee member of the Dorset Pension Fund. But yeah, I don't think that sort of stops me voting, but just for clarity, just to state that. And the only other paragraph I wanted to just sort of query and check on is paragraph 11 of the agreement, about, for the purposes of clause 10 of the collaboration agreement, there'll be no relevant transfer of staff for the purposes of TUPE at the termination date. So yeah, where it talks about again BCP indemnifying Dorset Council against all liabilities in connection with any claim by any staff employed on the services at the termination date. So is the reason that there's no relevant transfer of staff for the purposes of TUPE because all remaining staff will be transferred, will be with BCP rather than SVPP, so there is no sort of TUPE applicable. Is my understanding right?
Yeah, your understanding is right. There will be no TUPE to Dorset. That specifically refers to the original collaboration agreement that was drawn up between the four authorities, that if there was an ending of the partnership, then staff may return to what was their originating authority. So that was potential within the original collaboration agreement. The letter of the agreement has said that all staff will stay with BCP Council. The legal advice also said that, not legal, HR advice also said that all staff would remain with BCP Council and TUPE wouldn't apply. So that's just confirming the clause within the original collaboration agreement won't apply.
And just further to that, as a supplementary, just to clarify then that, so the staff would transfer to sort of BCP Council. In terms of the staff's positions and their terms of employment and their contracts and continuity of service and all those sorts of things, is there any impact on the staff in those respects, or as far as the staff moving to sort of BCP concerned, is it just, does it continue as continuity of employment, and does it have the same terms and conditions of employment for those staff?
Yes, exactly, that they would stay as a BCP employee, effectively just moving from one section to another within what will be financial services.
Thanks for that. I did want to just make crystal clear that there's no sort of disadvantage for the SVPP staff in terms of staying with BCP, that none of them will be disadvantaged in any way in terms of their employment contracts.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. So I'm just going back to my. So I can't use ModGov because it's not. I'm not BCP. So I've got yeah. Do you know what I'd come across? I'm not sure what my Dorset Council colleagues would think, but. There we go. Okay, scroll up again. Okay, so there are the recommendations to take. I'm going to do them on block. So it's recommended that A, in accordance with the collaboration agreement, 1st of April 2014, the letter of agreement on March 30th, 2022, the SVPP be dissolved as of, there we go, the ghost doesn't like it, dissolved as of the 31st of March 2023. B, the SVPP transfer of functions plan agreed by the SVPP board on the 10th may be duly updated and reviewed to solve the partnership. C, through the transfer of functions to the partner council contributions to the SVPP budget and be adjusted to reflect services returning to each council, and this process may result in stranded costs in the SVPP. Any overspend or underspend of the 2022-23 budget will, upon the ending of the SVPP, be met by partner councils in line with the cost share agreement. And E, in accordance with the letter of agreement, the SVPP reserves of £600,772,747 will be held for the BCP Council. Do I propose for that, please?
With regret, but I'll propose.
Yeah, it's all with a very heavy heart, isn't it? I'm going to need a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Stour, or else it'd be as awkward as last time. I think it's really sad, and I won't bang on about it because you know my feelings. But yeah, it's certainly with a heavy heart. But I think now, at least now, the officers can have a very clear steer over their future. As there's no dissenters, but that is carried. And we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the forward plan.
Yes, thank you. This forward plan is produced by the Scrutiny panel for the partnership to take us up to the 31st of March 2023. We've got the next meeting in September, which will be a key meeting to see how things progress at that point in time. Then following that, in a meeting in December, which should really be acknowledging that we're almost there with regards to transfer of functions. And then another meeting then in January, and then finally yet to work out how it will take place on the 31st of March or close to that, some recognition in a meeting between the chairman of committees and the Section 151 office to formally sign off the dissolution of the partnership. What would normally have happened is it was scheduled in the collaboration agreement that the committee would meet again in May or June to sign off the accounts. But as SVP will formally dissolve, including the committee meetings on the 31st of March, it's just really they're agreeing to delegate that to Section 151 officers to finalise the accounts. Thank you.
Are there any comments on the forward plan from members? Councillor Brown.
Not particularly. No, I think that looks fine to be able to sort of monitor the sort of the ongoing work and the transfer of functions to make sure that it's all sort of working smoothly. My only other comment now, sort of following that last agenda item and looking at the forward plan, is obviously to wish the officers sort of, good luck in managing the transfer of functions, because I think you think, oh, it's just sort of wind things down a bit, but to me it's probably equivalent with setting SVPP up in the first place, where you have to sort of set up systems and processes and contracts and that, and then we've had many years where it's sort of a case of managing the sort of delivery of the service. But now this coming year sort of probably needs different skill sets and different project management and different tasks for officers at all levels and staff to be able to sort of cease contracts and wind things down and to make those transfers. So I think there's quite a lot of work to be done over the coming 10 months roughly. So yeah, I think just to acknowledge the amount of work and different type of work and costs and effort that's going to be needed over the next 10 months.
Yeah, I think it would be useful to echo David's points. I think it is a lot of work. I'm aware that we've got 2 meetings, haven't we, where we're going to look at the transfer of functions, review phases and adjustments. So we've got September and November, and August. Is that going to be enough? Because I'm just concerned that this is a lot of work. Are there going to be any decisions made over the summer?
I think, Chair, it's mainly monitoring the progress that we've made in as officers, recognising or proposing to you any changes that need to occur to the timetable, knowing that really December is an unmovable date that we need to achieve there. So it'd be for each council really to take any corrective action they need to take to make sure things stay on track with that timetable. But as I say, at the moment, things are working well. We've got a timetable and there's a very good relationship between BCP and Dorset Council to deliver this.
Just as long as it doesn't end up like Brexit, we're okay. All right, on that note, is there any other business? There's none. Let's go back to my agenda. So I'll close the meeting. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for attending. Just over an hour. Cheers. Thanks, Poole.